Hello, I'm Ryan Garlick, and this is a pretty good solution to the Zodiac killer's My Name Is cipher. This cipher is also known as the Z13 because of the 13 symbols. This cipher was mailed to a newspaper by the Zodiac serial killer 55 years ago, and there has been no official solution to date. But this has always been the most tantalizing Zodiac cipher, because maybe he was ready to turn himself in and just spelled his name out in these symbols. But before we jump in, a little about me. Like I said, my name is Ryan Garlick, and I'm a clinical professor of computer science at the University of North Texas. I was part of the code team on the History Channel's Hunt for the Zodiac Killer. Here I am contemplating important evidence on the show. So let's dive into what I think may be the solution to the Zodiac's My Name Is cipher. This is an incomplete timeline of the Zodiac case, with only the pieces relevant to the My Name Is cipher. We're going to jump in 11 days after Zodiac killed cab driver Paul Stein in San Francisco, the last confirmed Zodiac murder, when an article quoting Dr. D.C.B. Marsh appeared in the newspaper challenging Zodiac to reveal his name. So it's October 22nd, 1969, and this article is published in the San Francisco Examiner, a newspaper to which Zodiac had previously written. There are many similar articles published in the Bay Area and across the nation, but let's focus on this one. I became aware of this link from a story written by Michael Cole. The title of the article is Cipher Expert Dare Zodiac to Tell Name. Zodiac taunted the police in several of his previous letters, and this article was a psychological effort to goad Zodiac into revealing incriminating evidence by challenging him and issuing a dare. Note that the challenge is issued by Dr. D.C.B. Marsh. He was the president of the American Cryptogram Association. I underline doctor, and we'll see why this is important later. More references to Dr. Marsh and his challenge. Dr. Marsh then invites Zodiac to send a cipher with his name in it directly to him, and Dr. Marsh even gives an address. Dr. Marsh then tells the Examiner that the first code, meaning the 408 cipher that was sent 3 months earlier by Zodiac and quickly solved, was complicated, but never revealed Zodiac's name as promised. Let's go back to the timeline. About 2 weeks later, Zodiac mails the infamous 340 cipher, which was solved in 2020. Now it's 2 weeks later in November of 1969, and the San Francisco Chronicle receives this cipher along with a card. The cipher is known as the Z340, or just the 340 because it has 340 characters. This cipher is a 17 by 20 grid of symbols that resisted decoding for 51 years until Dave Aranchak, Sam Blake, and Jarl Van Eyck solved it and gave us this key. The solution was like the 408 cipher before it, in that each symbol stood for an English letter. This is called a substitution cipher. There are more than 26 symbols, so more than one symbol is used to represent some letters. This also made it harder to solve. For each symbol in the cipher, we find it in this table and substitute the green English letter for each occurrence of that symbol. Then, if we move some things around and make a few corrections, we get a message from Zodiac. Dave Aranchak has put out some great videos on this solution, but for our purposes here, having this key is going to be very important. So keep in mind that we now know the letters associated with each symbol in the 340 cipher. Let's go back to the timeline. Over the next few months, several more articles appear in the newspaper, with Dr. Marsh again challenging Zodiac. Now we're around the start of 1970, and more articles mention Dr. Marsh and his challenge to Zodiac to reveal his name. It's important to know that Zodiac was writing to several newspapers, and there was sort of a running conversation happening between Zodiac and the newspapers while Zodiac was terrorizing the Bay Area. Note the intentional tone of the article. Cryptogram expert belittles Zodiac code. The communications from Zodiac indicated his desire to be in control and let the police know that he was so smart and they were so dumb. But here, Dr. Marsh turns the tables and tells Zodiac, "I'm smarter than you, and I will break any cipher you send with your name in it." This was an effort again to goad Zodiac and hopefully have him slip up and incriminate himself through his writings to the newspapers. Again, it's Dr. Marsh. Stay with me on this for all the doctor underlines. And another mentioned that although Zodiac had promised that the first cipher would reveal his name, it did not. Although it would be another 50 years after this article was printed until the 340 cipher was solved, the 340 did not reveal his name either. Similar articles in the Vallejo Times-Herald and the Golden Daily Transcript. We know Zodiac closely follows the news. In fact, Zodiac had previously written to the Vallejo Times-Herald. It would have been nearly impossible for Zodiac to miss Dr. Marsh's challenge. These are just a few examples. Dr. Marsh was quoted in multiple articles in the San Francisco Examiner, the Los Angeles Times, and several others. As we'll see on the next slide, Zodiac follows his press. So as I mentioned, Zodiac almost certainly saw Dr. Marsh's challenge. And these are just a few examples of Zodiac letters where he communicates with newspapers and demands that his cipher be printed. Later, he even specifies that the cipher should be on the front page. And then he writes to the LA Times because they don't bury him on the back page like some of the others. Zodiac is closely following the newspapers and even wants to specify the placement of articles about him. He even calls out the portion of his bus bomb letter that needs to appear in the paper. Zodiac is now providing editorial direction to the newspapers and would sometimes include threats to kill more people unless he was published. Okay, back to the timeline. So let's fast forward a few months and Zodiac mails the "My Name Is" cipher. On April 20th, 1970, Zodiac mails the 13-character cipher. This letter also came with a second diagram of a bomb that Zodiac had supposedly built for taking out a school bus from the side of the road. Let's just keep in mind that Zodiac had bombs on his mind at this point in time. This cipher was originally written off as being too short for analysis. The length of this cipher is smaller than the unicity distance, meaning that we need more cipher symbols in order to determine what they mean. If I said my name is triangle, diamond, circle, square, that could mean Ryan, but it could really represent almost anything else. And without more contextual information, we would never know the solution. But I think, based on Zodiac's relative sophistication in creating ciphers, that he knew this. I think Zodiac knew this was too short to solve by itself, and he gave us a very important clue. When we look at more of this letter, Zodiac seemed to be telling us that we need to solve the previous cipher, the 340, first. He says, by the way, have you cracked the last cipher I sent you? The last cipher he sent us was the 340. And 50 years later, we got that key. I think the "My Name Is" cipher is too short by itself, but now we have the key that Zodiac suggested we need. So let's apply the 340's key to the "My Name Is" cipher. When we fill in the English letter from the key for each associated symbol, we get this. There's no guesswork here. I'm just using the 340 key and filling in the letters. Notice that it ends in EDO. There are very few English words that end in EDO, but there are a few. But what about these symbols? They're not present in any of the previous ciphers, so they aren't in the 340 key. We have the 8 in a circle, or the Taurus symbol in a circle, and the upside down Aries symbol, or upside down T. Since these are new symbols, we need to figure out what they represent. There are 676 possibilities for picking these two letters, and I selected a T for the first one and a P for the second. So let's fill those in. And let's break this up into words. We have Doctor eat a torpedo. If we make one correction and flip the final T to an R, we get Doctor eat a torpedo. This may be Zodiac's reply to Dr. Marsh. Corrections like flipping that T to an R were required in both of the solved Zodiac ciphers. That's all I did. Apply the 340 key, fill in the 2 previously unseen symbols, and flip 1 letter. At first, I thought Zodiac was just firing off a crude insult to Dr. Marsh to eat his torpedo, but while I was visiting with Dave Aranchak, he pointed out that torpedoes were a type of firework. I knew about fun snaps or poppets, the little pouches that you throw on the ground to explode, but torpedoes were an older and much more dangerous version of these. Torpedoes are spherical or pouch fireworks that you just throw on the ground. They don't have a fuse. Interestingly, there was a brand of torpedoes first made in Japan in the 1920s with the brand name Mikado torpedoes. This is probably circumstantial, but Zodiac followers will recognize the connection. The Mikado is a comic opera set in Japan that features an executioner named Koko. Zodiac quoted lines from the Mikado in his Little List letter to the San Francisco Chronicle, and there is definitely a connection between the Zodiac and the Mikado. Just sort of an interesting coincidence. There's another type of explosive torpedo. These are railway torpedoes, small coin-sized pressure-detonated explosives. They're not very big, maybe 1.5 inches across, with these characteristic metal straps that hold them onto railroad tracks. They're obsolete now, but when a train would run over them, it would give a warning to the engineer to slow down for something ahead. Remember these, because they're going to be important later. If you want to see a video of these in action, here's a YouTube link. I was curious if "eat a torpedo" was an insult that may have been used at some point in the past. Apparently, the concept of eating a torpedo was not unknown, at least in the 1930s when Zodiac may have grown up. Torpedoes were sometimes confused with candy and put in the mouth, with the expected horrific results. These are just a sample of the articles I found relating to this. There are many. Like I say, I didn't realize that eating a torpedo was a thing. It's interesting that there is no explanation in the articles. Apparently everyone knew what was meant by biting a torpedo or eating a torpedo. The more modern version of these actually has a warning message not to put them in your mouth. So let's return to our timeline. And move forward just a bit in time. Now, on April 28th, 1970, just 8 days after the My Name Is cipher, Zodiac is on a writing spree. On April 28th, he sends the Dragon card with what may be some evidence to validate my solution. This is the Dragon card that Zodiac sent to the San Francisco Chronicle, where he is sorry to hear our ass is a dragon. On the back of this card, he bizarrely tells the editor that he would like to see people wearing buttons on their shirts with his crosshair symbol on them. You know, what better way to have the people of San Francisco celebrate you than to threaten to blow up school buses? I guess this made sense to Zodiac, though. At the time, some people wore buttons like "Save Water, Shower Together," and "Stamp Out Reality." One of these buttons was "Melville Eats Blubber," referring to the author of Moby Dick. But notice that Zodiac changes it to "Melvin Eats Blubber." Zodiac was making a swipe at Melvin Belli, the attorney that Zodiac wrote to right before the My Name Is letter. Notice also that Zodiac says Melvin's button would be a nasty one. Zodiac reminds us that eating blubber is an insult. And he mentions blasts and bombs, likely referring to the bus bomb diagram that he sent with the My Name Is letter 8 days before. So 8 days after Dr. Eat a Torpedo, Zodiac has blasts and weird eating-related insults on his mind. I think this goes to Zodiac's mindset and the correctness of my solution. Zodiac is telling Dr. Marsh to eat a torpedo, and 8 days later he's telling Melvin Belli to eat blubber. This is another interesting piece of the puzzle, but it isn't even close to the next one. Let's go back to the timeline. Now we have a break in the timeline, and let's jump ahead to early 1991, when some very interesting evidence was uncovered in a search warrant. What I'm going to show you now is why I conclusively think Dr. Eat a Torpedo is the correct solution. This is the first reveal of evidence linking a Zodiac suspect to a cipher. I've held back on releasing this for 4 years due to talks with a few documentary production companies. I think only about 5 or 6 people have seen this cipher connection before now. Here we go. In 1991, a search warrant was executed on Arthur Lee Allen's house in Vallejo, California. Arthur Lee Allen has been the main suspect in the Zodiac case since the 60s, and Arthur Lee Allen had explosive torpedoes in his house. This is an itemized list of the things that were seized during the search warrant. He also had pipe bombs, primer cord, and fuses. Dr. Eat a Torpedo just seemed like a general insult to Dr. Marsh until I was discussing it with Trey Borzilieri. Trey pointed me to this list of things seized from Arthur Lee Allen. This is the first potential link from a cipher to a suspect. Zodiac may not have even considered this incriminating at the time, but he might have been looking at these on his shelf when he created the cipher. This is pretty compelling evidence to me. Railroad torpedoes are unique items. But to be fair, let's look at the counterpoints to this solution to the cipher. Finding torpedoes in the main suspect's house was the evidence that pushed me over the edge of believing this was the correct solution. But let's look at some questions that remain. The first counterpoint is that the My Name Is cipher is too short for meaningful analysis. This is true. But I would argue that the cipher is too short by itself. I think Zodiac knew it was too short by itself based on his relative sophistication with cipher creation. He basically told us that we had to have the solution to the 340 to solve this short cipher by including the hint about, have you cracked the last cipher I sent you? We can catch Zodiac and beat it out of him or find his notes or something definitive like that. But otherwise, I think we have 2 alternatives. We can use the circumstantial and contextual clues that we have, including the 340 key, or we will never know the solution absent a confession. Even using the 340 key, I can't prove this solution is correct. I'm not saying this is it and I will fight anyone who disagrees. I'm just saying there is a lot of circumstantial evidence behind this solution. My assertion is that this is the most compelling solution to the My Name Is cipher to date. Without Zodiac's notes, since the cipher is so short, we have to follow contextual clues or else we'll never know what it says. Clues like using the 340 key, recognizing that Zodiac told Melvin Belli to eat blubber and Dr. Marsh to eat a torpedo within 8 days of each other. But give me through the slide after this one to explain the compelling claim. But it is true, there is not a mathematical way to score one solution over another when we don't know how Zodiac encoded this short message. Another counterpoint is that even using the 340 key, there are other messages that could be in the My Name Is cipher. This is also true. But I can't find any that make sense. Remember, all I did was apply the 340 key, fill in the 2 symbols that were not present in any previous cipher, and make one correction. But given just those constraints, there are 220,376 possible solutions for this cipher. Almost all of them are nonsense like Ifo, but there are Dream a Mom redo and Dream a Tot redo. Maybe Zodiac was dreaming of redoing his relationship with his mother, or maybe he overcooked some tater tots and wants a do-over, but these just don't make sense in context. I've provided a file of all 220,000 of these potential combinations, trying each letter of the alphabet for the 2 symbols and then making one correction, if you want to look through this file. This is a word segmentation problem. The first 300 are listed here to give you an idea of what most of these look like. So let's look at a summary of what I mean by a compelling solution. This is a reply to Dr. Marsh's challenge, and it would have been very hard for Zodiac to miss that challenge. Zodiac was writing to the same newspapers in which Dr. Marsh's challenge appeared, and Zodiac followed his press and told us he wanted to be on the front page. This message sounds like Zodiac, insulting people that challenge him. He continuously taunts the police, Melvin Belli, newspapers, the general public, and now Dr. Marsh. This solution uses the 340 key, as Zodiac hinted. By making the My Name Is cipher short, we had to solve the 340 before we could solve the My Name Is cipher, and I think Zodiac knew this based on the length of the cipher. We know that Zodiac was fairly skilled at cipher creation. This solution does not open up nearly unlimited degrees of freedom by allowing anagramming or rearranging letters. It doesn't bring in Morse code or astrology. You don't need the Mayan calendar. You don't need to steal the Declaration of Independence and squirt lemon juice on it. This solution follows the same method that Zodiac used in his other ciphers: substitution of letters for symbols with correction. All I did was use a 340 key as Zodiac hinted, fill in 2 unknown symbols, and apply 1 correction. Using a different method through anagramming, bringing in lookup tables or binary codes or something like that isn't a fair comparison, and it's not how Zodiac made his solved ciphers. I'm not making this cipher say what I want it to say through some arbitrary method. I'm using the known Zodiac code-making methods to read what I think the cipher says. There are many potential solutions to this cipher floating around. In my opinion, almost all of them are someone with a favorite suspect who starts with the suspect's name and then tries to jam that name into the cipher through whatever means necessary. I can make my name fit if I try hard enough. There are many combinations of Mr. Ryan Garlick, Dr. Ryan Garlick, Ryan G did it, name is Ryan G, it's me Ryan G, and so on. I can find one that works, but that's not how this should work. We don't get to start with a name and mash the cipher around until it fits. I didn't make the Allen-Torpedo connection until Trey Borzilieri found the inventory list from the search warrant of Arthur Lee Allen's home. The solved Zodiac ciphers unfortunately did not contain a name, social security number, and home address. Did we really think Zodiac was going to put his name in the cipher, even though he didn't do it in any of the previously solved ciphers? He tells us as much in the solution to the earlier 408 cipher. I will not give you my name. Notice also how many corrections or flipped letters there were in the solution to the 408. This is very similar to the correction in my solution to the My Name Is cipher, with Torpedo changed to Torpedo. Again, in my opinion, there is no way Zodiac is going to put his name in a cipher. This is completely unrealistic. If Zodiac wanted to surrender, he would have. Other solutions that do all sorts of gymnastics to force a suspect's name into the cipher are, in my opinion, incorrect. 8 days after telling Dr. Marsh to eat a torpedo, Zodiac tells Melvin Belli to eat blubber. Zodiac had blasts and eating-related insults on his mind. And Arthur Lee Allen, the primary suspect in the Zodiac case, had torpedoes in his house. So I am presenting this for peer review and discussion. I'm walking into the critics' lair full Monty here, no fig leaf. But I genuinely think this is the solution to the Z13 cipher. Thanks for listening. This presentation is built upon the work of many people on many websites, message boards, and forums. And there are many more than what I listed here, but I wanted to put some links up for further reading. Thanks.